Free-to-plays are the heart and soul of Team Fortress 2. As much as we love to poke fun at them for being mainly new to the game, or for being unwilling to drop loads of money into something that is literally free, they experience TF2 in what is arguably its purest form. No flashy unusual hats, no wacky killstreak sheens or eye effects, no strangers to track their points or kills, and most importantly, no funny taunts. The only things that reside within their inventories are unlockable items received via the random drop system, achievements, limited crafting system, and the occasional Smith stocking. And to these new players, it's honestly quite exciting obtaining brand new stuff whenever, given how little options they already have, and then ultimately being disappointed when you realize it's a goddamn eviction notice. But I know what you might be thinking. Why do I care so much about free-to-plays? Well, let me put it this way. A generous majority of players who continue to play TF2 to this very day started playing after the Uber update. Now, why is this specific update relevant? Why, that's because the Uber update was in the long run one of the most influential updates in TF2's history, but not because it added staple weapons like the Tomislav or the funny spoon. Instead, it's simply because from that point forward, TF2 was officially a free-to-play game. Before then, the game was priced at $20. And as you would imagine, removing that cost of entry opened the floodgates to many more people wanting to at the very least try out TF2. And I guarantee that there's a bunch of you guys out there watching this video who only got into TF2 because it was a free game. Take me for example. I remember getting my first actual desktop machine back in 2017 and installing TF2 shortly after. And even though the game wasn't running the best without a config, it was a legitimately fun experience collecting new weapons to use, slowly figuring out what weapons would work best with others, slamming achievements left and right just to receive even more weapons to use, and you cannot imagine the roller coaster of emotions I felt after getting the haunted scrap, totally legit by the way, and wanting to craft it, but quickly realizing it was deemed a premium crafting recipe. But then of course I became premium, crafted it, and well, if pixels could collect dust, this thing would be covered. But I'm getting off track. I genuinely feel like free-to-plays keep TF2 as alive as it will forever be. For every single player finally deciding to move on for good, there's at least one person looking around on Steam, hearing about it from a friend, or even wanting to play it after seeing videos on the game, all leading to new people potentially getting into TF2. I mean, why wouldn't they? TF2 is a fun and goofy little game which just so happens to be free, and given its age, it should be able to run on basically any relatively modern machine. Keyword should. However, the unfortunate truth is that new free-to-plays just will not be able to enjoy quite the same experience that most of us had in the past. And before you even ask, this isn't some boomer rant about how skillful a combo was before it was nerfed into the ground, or about how the game hasn't received a major content update in quite a few years. Absolutely nothing that selfish. This is about the changes that took place against free-to-plays. Tell me, when was the last time you heard a free-to-play talk in a game of TF2? Now, I understand there's a few factors. You might not play with voice chat on, I getcha. Plus, you could just as easily not know who is a free-to-play just from the HUD indicator that someone is talking. But anyways, if you're someone who mainly plays on community servers, honestly, it's probably been business as usual.
Finally, I get item.
But if you frequent official servers, you'll notice something very different. You hear that? It's silence. Why is that? 2020 was quite a bizarre year. We all remember how absolutely insane things were, and at a place like Valve HQ, things were no different. I could only begin to imagine the pain that poor goddamn plant went through without being watered for months. But somehow, in some way, during this time of uncertainty, Valve had released 2 updates to TF2 that would go on to change the way free-to-play accounts interact with the game, with the first of the 2 taking place at the tail end of springtime. This was your typical TF2 maintenance update. It fixed a few cosmetics from being broken in some goddamn way, it added some medals, and for some reason they updated the potassium bonnet by renaming it to the potassium bonnet. And for some reason, it ain't documented. Nonetheless, there was one pretty massive change that came with this particular update. To quote the patch notes released, they restricted certain new accounts from using chat in official matchmaking modes, which was followed by the note that work is ongoing to mitigate the use of new and free accounts for abusive purposes. I'm not even gonna bother trying to beat around the bush. This was a clear attempt to try to do something about the ever-growing bot crisis, which during this time was very likely full of free-to-play accounts. But it also had the unfortunate side effect that all free-to-play accounts, regardless if they're being used to cheat or just to be a goofy little pootis, were officially restricted from communicating via in-game text chat within official servers. And in theory, this doesn't sound like it would be that bad of a change. I mean, chat during this time was being utterly spammed with messages and fake clearings to make using it kinda impossible. But due to this affecting every single free-to-play, it meant that if you were one and just wanted to use chat to share your hilarious and original binds, compliment someone for a kill, or god forbid just talking to another player, you just wouldn't be able to do that in the game itself unless you decided to pay the fee to upgrade your account to premium, or just exclusively play on community servers. But you know, text chat isn't the only type of communication within TF2, and if one option can no longer be used for abuse, you can imagine that the other was bound to become the next target, and it didn't take Valve too long to work on that as well. Less than 1 whole month later, another maintenance update was released. This unsurprisingly includes more of the same. They updated the Saxy, added even more medals, and funnily enough another cosmetic was renamed, but this time it was simply just add an apostrophe to the Eliminator safeguard, once again being undocumented. But as expected from the note in the June 16th update, action against bots was continued, but this time focusing their attention towards voice chat, with Valve going on to state that accounts that are unable to chat in matchmaking are now also restricted from sending voice chat. So let's break this down. Within the span of about 2.5 weeks, in an effort to mitigate the damage the bot crisis was causing, Valve restricted all free-to-play accounts, including many innocent players from using text chat and now voice chat within casual or other officially supported servers. Plus, this wasn't explicitly stated, but they are also restricted from using voice commands. Yeah, that's right. Free-to-plays from this point forward were unable to call for a goddamn medic. It's undeniable that these were pretty questionable decisions by Valve, but within the context that the world was at stage 10 crazy during this time, it's understandable why such a seemingly small change was implemented as opposed to something a lot more definite. But regardless, the reality of the situation is that these changes simply didn't do much of anything against the bots themselves. Listen, reducing the amount of slurs being slung in text and voice chat is by all means a good change, plus the addition of an actual option to disable text and voice communication, even though it's pretty easy to do on your own. But changes like these can't do anything to stop the bots. All they can do is simply make them silent, which may make it harder to notice bots on your own team right away. And because these changes were mainly just to clean up foul stuff that was being said by malicious accounts, free-to-plays took quite the hit for something that could have been somewhat maintained via some decent chat moderation. But there's another factor I want to go over. While these players certainly can play without having the ability to communicate freely or even use voice commands, their experience within the easiest way to play the game is by definition limited. This sucks if you're just a decent player who just had no interest in giving Valve money to have fun with the game. You cannot call for spies, use team chat to share some secret intelligence, or say literally goddamn anything. It upsets me that regaining access to such basic features that have been part of the game forever requires paying money or getting someone to give you an upgrade to premium, which kinda brings into question that maybe, just maybe, TF2 is now leaning slightly towards pay to win. I understand that this is a very bold claim to make, and it's over arguably one of the smallest things in the game, but nonetheless it is a part of TF2. Communication is what makes a team an actual team. Why do you think competitive matches are filled with players doing callouts to each other? Because sharing your knowledge with your team and vice versa can make a team do better if they can take advantage of it. But even within casual settings, being able to quickly hit a couple buttons to call out a nearby spy, pop duper, camp teleporter, spy stabbing with your eternal reward, or just some demo man camping a spawn door, communication is a very beneficial part of the game, as it takes a team from being just a group of idiots fighting together to an actual unit of cooperating players set on winning a match, or making a conga line. So I must ask, does it feel fair towards these players to be restricted like this? While I understand that Valve has always prioritized its premium players in some way, all the features that are locked for free-to-play accounts are designed to be cosmetic or otherwise optional, with anything relating to actual gameplay being accessible to all players. Having extra backpack slots, the ability to craft items with rare blueprints, and being able to use your own items to trade are completely optional to actually playing the game. I know TF2 is a war-themed game adressa, but you don't need fancy cosmetics to play the game, whereas being able to communicate with others directly within the match itself is a gameplay mechanic. Is it a particularly active one? God no, but it's still something that can be used to give an advantage as long as it's being used correctly, which makes it something that should be accessible accessible to all. But let's move on from the past and talk about how things are now, a little under 3 years later. Of course, bots are still around, which I know sounds incredibly negative, but I understand how difficult it is to tackle this issue effectively. And hey, credit where credit's due, especially since Save TF2, we've gotten quite a lot of progress towards eliminating bots through quality of life improvements. But hold on, aren't the bots actively communicating again? What gives? The original reason for disabling chat access on free accounts was to prevent these bots from abusing them, but given VAC being old as hell, as well as there being bypasses for it, the fear of these bots actually getting banned were pretty low. So if you're wondering why most of the bots you see today are still incredibly talkative, it's simply because they are not free to play. Yeah, they are premium accounts, making these changes way back in 2020 essentially irrelevant, which leaves free to plays to not only take a pretty major hit, but also without any of the benefits that such a change was originally meant to have. I understand it sounds like I'm making a big deal over something that only affects so many players, and even more so, only on official servers. You could just as easily boot up a local Skyle server, Uncletopia, or god forbid a Furry Pound server and be able to play the game without losing out on the ability to chat. But that discredits the value of casual. Most new players when starting out will look at their options and queue for casual, since it's designed to be the easiest way to play the game. And because of that, I feel the need to vouch for these players, since as easy as it is to forget about free-to-plays when you don't hear them, they deserve to be able to talk, especially within the environment that is meant to be run by the company that owns the game. So why hasn't Valve reverted this decision? It could honestly be for a lot of reasons. For one, it could be as simple as they just simply forgot to revert it, but honestly, I don't think it would be that simple. Here's the thing, restricting access to something that in theory doesn't make a major effect on the game for the sake of dealing with an ongoing problem makes sense, but it also has the effect that it would make some of the actual players who are free to play upgrade to premium, which for Valve means more money. And yes, this can be seen as pretty scummy, and I hope that's not the case, but it feels like a realistic reason to keep things the way they are. But alternatively, they could still just maintain the belief that it's to prevent bots from spreading malicious content, but as we've seen, that was pretty easily bypassed. But enough about my conspiracy theories regarding this. We have gotten some serious improvements in the years since, from giving us the option to censor in-game text chat, or as previously mentioned, disabling it entirely from advanced options, as well as it being impossible for bots to copy other people's names and icons to blend in, plus the updates towards the voting system, which comes with ups and downs, but is much better than how it was a long time ago. So as gloomy as it may be to still see bots roaming around, it's definitely not as bad as it once was now that we've gotten more permanent solutions. And if we continue to receive this kind of maintenance, I feel like it can only get better. But with that said, I hope that one day this decision against free-to-plays can be reversed. It doesn't feel fair to restrict them from using functions that, despite being pretty small in the grand scheme of things, still have an impact on the game. And perhaps I'd feel differently if the original decision back in 2020 made an actual impact on the situation, but due to it changing basically nothing, I feel like free-to-plays deserve to be able to talk again within official servers. And maybe one of these days, it will happen, and I'll get hundreds of comments telling me that they can talk again. But then again, time will tell.